Hi, in this video I want to work with various divs in CSS in Dreamweaver CS4 in order to manipulate their position. In particular, I want to emphasize centering divs on the page. So let me kind of show you what I have so far. I've got a web page here and I'm in Dreamweaver CS4, and I've got several divs, including several container divs. If you kind of look at my design view here, you can see I've got this yellow box with a thin black border. That is my container 1, and it's referenced over here in my style sheet. Now within my container 1 I have a header div with a thick black border, and then below that this green box is my container 2. Container 2 contains my sidebar, which doesn't look like a sidebar yet, with a purple border, and it also contains my main content area with an orange border. So my container 2 contains two different divs. Now below my container 2 I've got my footer area, which has a red border. So if we were to count this out, I've got this main parent container div, the yellow box, that's 1 div, the header is 2, the green container is 3, the sidebar is 4, the main content area is 5, and the footer area is 6. So I have 6 different divs. Each of them are uniquely identified, and I can confirm this too if I jump over to code view. There is my container 1, which contains the header. Below that is container 2, which contains the sidebar and the main content. Then I have the end of my container 2. After my container 2 I've got my footer div, and then after that I close off the container 1. So I've got divs within divs. And so far, as you can see, I've only done the most basic formatting. I've used some background colors and some border colors to give them to make them noticeable, to make them obvious to you. Something else I've done is I've messed around with some of the margins and some of the padding. For instance, my container 1, the yellow box here, has padding equivalent to 20 pixels on all 4 sides. That's how we're getting this cushion of space. Padding is inside the border. So I've got this cushion of space, 20 pixels of padding around the interior of my yellow container 1 div. Now I've also applied some margins. Notice how my header and my footer are inset a little bit on the left and the rights. Well, those items happen to have 5 pixels of margin on all 4 sides. So for instance, my header, here it is, margin 5 pixels. So there's 5 pixels of margin, which is just outside the thick black border, on the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. So my header and my footer are dealing with a compound collection of space here. They've got the 20 pixels of padding from their parent container plus the 5 pixels of margin from themselves. So basically we could figure out that there's 25 pixels of space between the header and the borders of the parent div. So that's causing that little inset, and if we don't like that we can remedy that, and I'll do that soon enough. So I've got divs within divs. Now one of the first things I will do is set a reset in order to take away the browser's default margins and paddings. Now this is an extremely handy and very simple tool, although there are some more complicated ones out there. Over on Eric Meyer's website, meyerweb.com, fantastic author with a lot of great information about cascading style sheets, he's got a reset div available that you could simply copy. And his is rather large. Notice that it takes all these various elements, main elements of a web page, and sets their margin and padding to 0, as well as their border and some other aspects. And then he takes care of a few other things too. We have to remember as web designers that different browsers have different default interpretations of what CSS should mean. They apply different margins and padding. And we actually already see that here in Dreamweaver. We see that there's some white space outside of my yellow div, my container 1. Well, I never put margins on that, so where does that white space come from? Well, it's the default padding of the web page itself. Well, here's a really quick and easy way to reset that. I'm going to go ahead and take I'm going to create a new CSS rule, and instead of a class selector I will choose a compound selector or an advanced selector if you're using Dreamweaver CS3. And my selector is going to be an asterisk. The asterisk selector represents all other selectors. And I've been doing my CSS on this document only instead of an external style sheet, so I'll continue that. I'm going to click OK, and the only thing I'm going to do for this new reset selector, CSS Rule definition for asterisk, which is a wildcard, represents everything, I'm going to go to my box category, and I'm going to put in 0 for padding, 0 for margin, and click OK. Now I don't know if you caught that, but really quickly I just lost that white space outside of the yellow container 1 div. Let me go ahead and do a file save, and you'll see this again. I've got Dreamweaver open with my page. As soon as I hit refresh, there we go, I'm right off to the very edge. There's no white space around my yellow div, and I've also got Internet Explorer open. Let me hit refresh on this one. Same thing happens. So by resetting some of the margins and paddings for your selectors, that's going to go a long way to ensuring that your web pages look the same or very, very close to the same in the popular browsers, particularly Internet Explorer and Firefox. So that's a basic reset. Now something else I should do, and make sure your reset selector is positioned as your first selector. By default, mine just happened to appear in the second. So here in Dreamweaver, I'm just going to take that selector and drag it up a notch so it is the topmost selector, topmost rule. Now, if I wanted to have items with margins and paddings, as I certainly will, that's no problem. When I go ahead and apply margins and paddings to other elements down here, they will override the 0 margins and paddings set by this generic selector. So this is a good way to structure it. Your reset selector or reset rule is first, and then you specifically indicate what you want after that fact.